On March 6th of last year, I woke up early in the morning.
This is Doug, who I've known for a very, very long time.
Ready to start my day as anyone normally would. However, I had horrible ringing.
He was generous enough to sit down with me, and we went through this conversation. I asked him some questions, and I want to bring that to you today and go through it because I think it's fascinating.
I couldn't hear very well, and then I realized I couldn't hear anything out of my left ear. And then went about my morning as best as possible, trying to figure out what was going on. Bit of vertigo, went on a job site, and it was fairly unbearable. It really knocked me on my ass.
From conversations to the natural world to complete silence, so many of us focus on what's next rather than what is happening now. I'm Listening is a podcast that dissects the importance of listening.
I'm Drew Richmond.
And I'm Brant Christofferson.
And this is I'm Listening, a podcast simply about the skill of listening. Today, we take our podcast and we go into the realm of what if you can't hear? Because I think our podcast is under the assumption that if you are listening or if you value the skill of listening, that hearing is an assumed component of that.
Yeah.
And it's time to twist that a little bit. Doug, thanks for joining us today. This is a podcast that's called I'm Listening.
What?
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks for having me, Drew.
So this is something you wake up and your left side is completely deaf, kind of deaf?
Completely
deaf. So this is this tinnitus. And explain to me what is that? I pronounced it tinnitus, maybe tinnitus,
yeah,
but
no,
we'll call it tinnitus.
Technically tinnitus. Some people say ringing, and when I say ringing, because somebody might not know what tinnitus is.
Yep. And it's this ringing in the ear, buzzing in the ear. I actually looked it up in preparation for this discussion today, and the definition that pops up on the Google is a perception of sound, not an actual sound. So I think most people have kind of dealt with this, and I've dealt with it. It kind of your ear is ringing, and before you can think about it ever again, it kind of fades away, and you move on with your life. Not the case for you, but it's this perception of sound. It's not actually coming from the ears. Where's it coming from?
It's coming from the kind of the frontal lobe of the brain. It's kind of the absence of sound, and some people have different variations. Some people have very low tinnitus. Some people have it very high, where it's volume 0 to 10. Mine rolls at about a 7 to 8 most of the time. And some people have hearing at different levels, 0% to 100. I have 0% hearing in my left ear, so it makes the perception of the sound or the tinnitus or the ringing or whatever you want to call it much more defined and much more present in there. So it's much more difficult to put it away, put it in the background, forget about it.
You're going through the experiences on this day, and you also talked about vertigo. This is the kind of the dizzy, can't focus, loss of balance to a certain degree, right? That's what you experienced at that time too.
Yeah, absolutely. So what happened was they suspect that I had a virus that took down the auditory nerve.
Wow. Okay, so he lost his hearing in his one ear because of a viral infection?
That's what was ultimately determined. It was crazy.
What?
I mean, he went to bed totally fine, woke up, and it was gone.
And so whenever you have any sort of trauma to that area, everything is all interconnected. I had horrible vertigo for probably 3 to 4 weeks where I was unable to drive. And, kind of to explain, I was probably functioning on as if I was on two or three beers, for a good month. And I gave up alcohol about 2.5 years ago, so it was not a fun feeling. It was a feeling that I didn't enjoy.
Right.
So it made things very difficult.
Yeah.
But that's gone away. So I'm good now. Every once in a while it creeps up, but
yeah, so it's all connected, but you got this tinnitus, you've got this loss of hearing, and all of this literally happens overnight.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about what you experience over the next 2 or 3 months or so in that time frame as you tried to figure out, you were talking to neurosurgeons, you were talking to ENTs, you were talking to all these folks. What was that journey like over the next, 3-4 months or so?
It was scary, to kind of put a word to it. It was very scary. Typically, when you have some sort of medical condition, there's a diagnosis, very clear, a treatment, a plan, an end. And one of these days it's going to go away and I'm going to go back to hearing things normally and functioning as I did before. But that date wasn't happening, and I did not have a plan at that time for a while, going through the testing and meeting with the audiologist. And finally it was, you know what? You're done. It's not coming back. You can either deal with it or you can talk to somebody else.
Could you imagine? Like,
no, it's permanent. It's all of the time.
Wow.
So he gets into
all the time.
So he gets into, what that means and what the impact that it has on him. Some of the tools that the doctors provided for him. So, how do you, if you're deaf and there's no sound and the only quote unquote sound that you're hearing is this buzzing or this ringing that your brain is producing. You can't get rid of it, but how can you mask it, or how can you lessen its effect on you? So there's actually, almost like a hearing aid thing that creates this white or pink or gray noise. He gets into this a little bit more and helps mask some of that tinnitus that he was experiencing and still does. Because it's one thing if you can hear and you experience it. It's another thing if there's no other sound. But this perception of sound, as it's phrased, this perception of sound is the only thing you hear. It could be have quite an effect on you.
That'd be maddening.
What the options were is dealing with it, and then one of the other options was going the route of a cochlear implant, which I was not familiar with. And then it's that little black thing that's attached to somebody's head that nobody knows what's going on, and everybody's too afraid to ask. But yeah, so I received a cochlear implant. The intent of that was to, allow me to hear sounds out of my left ear. And I was told that it would, be like an on and off switch. It would be an on and off switch for the tinnitus. And at least reduce it 30%, have some sort of improvement. That was the goal. But I have not had the benefit of any improvement there yet, but I'm hoping. It's a process. So
the cochlear implant, this is not a hearing aid. This is not an amplifying sound into your eardrum, because that doesn't matter, because you're deaf in that ear. That doesn't work anymore. So
correct.
Go into a little bit of the science of how does this work? What does it do? Yeah,
so it's the implant. It's like this little looks like a little thing of wires in a little gel pack with some leads, some small leads off the end. And what they do is they make a little incision behind my ear and go in with a little medical Dremel tool and carve out a bit of my skull. And yeah, they said it's like honeycomb in there, so it's a little bit messy, but they do a great job. And they set that in and they wire those leads into the stem of the brain where that nerve would connect. So that's the implant. So I received that right after Thanksgiving last year, 23. And then they let that all heal. And then I went back in January and got the processor, which is the external component, which is the battery and a receiver. So that's where the sound comes in, and then it transfers that electronically through the implant into my brain. I can hear things, however, it is an electronic sound. It does not sound like my voice sounds right now. Everything sounds very robotic, electronic. And I can have volume control, and it's Bluetooth, which is also really cool. So someday I'll be able to just have this on and be able to chill out and listen to tunes. I can hear the music, but it's not like I can sit down and listen to tunes on my Bluetooth new earpiece here. So.
And is there a piece that goes into the ear then too?
No,
or
it's external. There's a couple
obsolete?
Different ones, different models. Looks like hearing aid.
Sure,
But
sure.
one of the benefits of this is it's a visual for other people that, hey, you know what? This dude's got something going on. And that was one thing that was really difficult. I'm sorry, I can't hear you. It's a visual component, and that's very beneficial to me.
Right.
So that's a good part.
Right.
People avoid it too. People think I'm weird, which, you know,
Well, you are.
they're not wrong.
I imagine you have to spend some time. You said it's like a robotic sounds, things of that nature. You got to spend some time. Is there training? What do you, this isn't
There
just
is, yeah.
automatic.
Right. So there's a lot of cognitive training and development that needs to go on in therapy. So I spend a lot of time. So they say some of the best thing is time and speech, and it collects data, it trains the brain. So I try to spend a lot of time. So one of the best things to do is listen to audiobooks through the implant while reading the hard copy and following along. So you're seeing it, you're visualizing it, you're hearing it, you're listening. And they try to encourage about at least minimum 2 hours a day of just time in speech. And some of that is also watching TV with the closed captioning. Yeah, so that helps. But however, the tinnitus is a massive distraction as well. So it can kind of send your mind rolling in some other direction, and then you lose your page and you're like, oh man, where'd I go? And then you really have to tune in and dial in and figure out where you were. It's a lot of work.
Not having something that's always been there and it being gone, that's one thing. Having a ringing that's in your ear, that's an additional thing. The vertigo, all the other things that you described, I would imagine that would be a lot to take on. Not to mention, like, you don't see it. It's not like he broke an arm and he's got a cast on his arm. Everyone's like, oh, he broke his arm. He's not going to be able to go and carry this. It's kind of an invisible disability. So I would imagine he'd probably go through the day with people just talking to him at normal and him being like, I can't, hold on, right? How does he interact differently with others when they don't know that he can't hear out of one ear?
Yeah, he jokingly said, like, besides walking around with a t-shirt that said, I can't hear out of this ear with an arrow pointing up to his left side, to let people know it's an invisible disability or impairment. You're a little over a year of going through this entire experience. Let's tie this back to listening. Now you have this impairment, this disability, however you want to phrase it. I don't know. How do you phrase it? Do you phrase it as a disability? Is it an impairment? What do you...
It is, well, both. It's kind of an impairment. And is it a technical disability? Well, yes. Technically, I could file for disability and I would be officially disabled and I could not work the rest of my life. And that is one of the questions when I go in to see people, professionals, are you still working? And, I never thought about that. And then after, some of the challenges with this, it does affect me professionally. And I understand, yeah, it is a technical disability.
Right. So as you go through this, again, podcast is I'm listening. It's about the skill,
yes,
or the value of listening. You had that skill, you had that ability, you valued it. On March 5th of last year, you wake up and all of a sudden that main ability to do that gets completely altered, out of your control. What is listening to you today? How do you redefine that? Is it in a new way? What is listening to you?
It's a skill that I need to have in my toolbox and use probably more than I ever have in my life because it's more difficult. I have to think about the environments that I'm in, who I'm speaking with, how they are speaking, the volume. So when I'm going through a lot of the battery of tests that I did with audiologists and sitting in a booth in different conditions, in like a restaurant environment, a conversation happening like at a dinner table, a simulation, and I was picking up about 30 to 50% of those conversations. At work, in meetings, when I'm on job sites, picking up 30 to 50% of the conversation. It's like Mad Libs, where I try to get the keywords and do the best I can. still trying to find tools. Do I recording conversations and going back and listening to them again and being more intent with the surroundings and where I am and listening. One of the things that I socially, I love music. I love going to concerts. That has changed from small bar type places to large venues. Go to small venues to see friends and whatnot play, and it's just obnoxiously loud. And not a place that I find very comforting. And then, try to figure out where I can stand, where it sounds the best that I can listen. And, some venues have a lot of people that like to talk during concerts, which is one of my favorite things ever. It's kind of taken me back a little bit. I take those things into consideration and I pass, no thanks. It's not the place for me. And it's kind of sad. It sucks to not be able to do those things that I did before, but I understand why a lot of people don't now. That's been a part of it as well.
So in terms of listening, you said, you're hearing about 30 to 50% of what's happening in those different environments that you're in every day. That's part of the equation. The other part of the equation is that the person who's talking probably assumes that you're hearing or listening to 100% of what they have to say. Mm-hmm. What does that do? It's one thing for you to hear 50% and have to deal with that in that end. Those other folks are clearly assuming that you're hearing 100% of what they have to say, because that's what we all do. We walk through life assuming that what I said, you heard and you totally understand. How do you deal with that other side of the equation in terms of that conversation?
Yeah. So professionally, it's very easy. And being a project manager, it's most of the conversations are having a meeting notes or, hey, can you send me that in an email? Is profound as the tinnitus is. It's like going through life. If I just had to count by one, like this condition, this disability or whatever is like your friend that thinks it's funny to be like the 19, 24, 13, 92, the random number thing, and you just want to punch him in the mouth. I have that 24/7, 365 now. Well, hopefully that improves, but that's what it's like, and it's frustrating. So yeah, listening more intent, communication is different. Send me in an email. Can you repeat that? And then trying to remember it, not thinking about what I'm saying next, to actually understand and digest the words that I'm hearing in my one good ear through the noise filter. I forget a lot of things. It's a huge distraction.
Yeah.
It's a struggle most days.
If we can, if you'll allow me to go into that struggle a little bit more, you've got these, what I'll classify as physical ailments, right? What is this doing to your overall mental health?
Early on, it was a much larger hurdle. The mental health, it really knocked me on my ass, to think about where I am and the things that affect me now, and then to think about the things in the future, the kids' events and all of that stuff, and in family, and how am I going to deal with this then? And, you try to, the acceptance phase was very hard. And still, there are some days, most mornings, it's difficult. There's like a fog, right? When you've got all this going on. It takes me a little bit to get rolling in the morning. And some people have expectations of me in the mornings, and it's difficult, and I get frustrated. And then one of the tinnitus is exacerbated by stress and anxiety. So in my role in my job, it's fast-paced, detailed. It's stressful. And sometimes I get spun up. So you get the stress and anxiety, and then you ramp up the tinnitus and the deafness. It just gets worse. And then then I get frustrated. It's just a cycle that's difficult to break sometimes. And thinking about one of my favorite activities now, when I'm on the road or have some time, is I like to spend some time outdoors and doing some hiking, and sitting by a stream and realizing that you'll never be able to hear that silence with the little babbling brook or the soft winds. I have this head horn going all the time, and it's kind of sad actually. And I think about that. It's like, man, I'll just never have that opportunity to hear that silence again, that peace and quiet. nobody knows who's fighting what battle. It's softened me up, and I've had to take a step back and and have a little empathy for others and understand that people are dealing with some things. And, there are days where I don't know what the last straw is going to be if I'm going to, lash out. I get pretty upset and frustrated. There's a lot of things that I've lost with this, the hearing, the sound localization, right? People say, come here. I don't know what here means. Or you drop something on the floor, you can hear where it comes from. I don't have that ability anymore. And there's a safety component of that as well. Ignoring my left side most of the time. And when I'm driving, hearing sirens, where are they coming from? So I'm always have this heightened awareness all the time. In certain environments, around a lot of people, it's stressful. And at the end of the day, it's very exhausting. That's where, I've found that the cannabis helps tremendously with that component. Maybe not physically. It's not going to make my hearing come back or their tinnitus goes away, but it certainly helps me not care. I think about that for, the medical benefits of that for other people. And it's like, man, if people could just get out of their head a little bit and not care about whatever they're dealing with, man, that's a win. That's a win. I'll take as many victories as I can.
So go into that cannabis piece a little bit more, and what, it says to make you not care. What does that mean?
Well, so I got sober about 2.5 years ago, and that I will say I'm so thankful for my sobriety and going through this, being on this journey, because where I was on that train in dealing with this, it would not have probably, I don't know if I'd still be here, honestly, Drew. So I can't stress enough how important the sobriety has been in all of this. There are components to cannabis where a small amount provides me a lot of focus, and I'm not as freaking out. I'm not diving over and looking at emails while I'm working on different tasks. So there are those benefits as well that I find with the cannabis.
Yeah.
I encourage that over alcohol any day.
That makes sense.
I mean, it's a tool. And I find it to be just as important as, possibly the implant right now. I mean, you got to take care of the rest of your body with this, and whatever it takes to get through the day.
Yeah. Let's talk about, lack of a better term, the other side of this. So you've got this hearing impairment. You're deaf on the left side. You've got all these different things going on. Mm-hmm. Are there any positives that have come out of this? And that maybe not positives, that might not be the right word, but is there anything else that kind of looked at it and gone, wow, I'd never really thought of it that way?
For sure. There are some, some benefits of this. You try to look for some positives in anything, because I'm not going to all the shows, and I've found some peace, and I'm embracing the JOMO, the joy of missing out, the joy of not going to rowdy places and hanging around a bunch of loud, obnoxious people. I enjoy my home a little more. I'm more comfortable here.
Sure.
It's kind of knocking me on my ass, and do a lot of soul searching, and I spend a lot of time in my head. And I enjoy being at home. I enjoy just hanging out, petting the dog. I enjoy going out and working on my truck. I enjoy being by myself and in the car. That peace that I just never really took the time to appreciate years ago. And just having time with my thoughts, I start doing a lot of writing and journaling, things like that, trying to take that and put it into a positive. I would say sleep. That's a question I get from a lot of the docs. How are you sleeping? I sleep great, Drew. And despite this thing going on sometimes in the evening, when I roll over on my good ear, and that's all it is, I sleep fantastic. The downside of that is I don't hear alarms. At home here, I have the dog, the wife, whatever, morning routine, I'm up. However, when I'm on the road, and I'm in a hotel, I really need to make sure that my watch is on vibrate, because early on, yeah, I learned that the hard way. You sleep in and then, oh man, here I am out on the road. I'm late for a meeting. What are they thinking? So then you go back to the mental health component. Like, I can't do this. I can't do the things I once did. And I wasn't expecting this. I didn't choose this.
By the chances that folks listening to this either are suffering with something to this extent or know somebody that is, what messages do you have to folks that maybe are just falling into what you were dealing with over a year ago? You know, that first couple of weeks of, holy shit, I just woke up and I can't hear anything. Like this just happened to me. What are your words to them? What do you want to share with them?
Yeah. So, I posted a few things on social media about it early on, and a few people have reached out and said, you know what, I'm dealing with this too. It's absolutely horrible. And I wish I could say, hey, oh, it'll get better, or, hey, you should go the route of the implant. It's great. You can't lie about it, right? You can't say, oh, it'll get better. And I hear that a lot. Hope it all gets, it's like, oh, it's not going to. So you gotta figure out how to motivate yourself, acknowledge the wins, be aware of the triggers, avoiding the triggers, and take the time for yourself, the self-care. When I have to leave someplace because it's just too much, I'm okay doing that now. Advocate for yourself. It's one of those invisible injuries. Oh man. Yeah. Okay. I understand now. And, just being present. Good part of my life, I was always just chasing something, right? What's next? Gonna run the corporate ladder, and I'm gonna do this and that and make a ton of money and have a big house, and, I'm gonna do all these things. I don't really give a shit about that stuff anymore. It's forced me to be present, and I enjoy being present.
So is there a certain level of slowing down with that, to like slowing down your life to be more present, or can you be more present at the pace that you were?
I think it's difficult to be present at the pace that I was. Our lives right now, Drew, it's the social media, it's the appointments. It is running around for everything because you have to do it, because you don't have a reason not to. And now I've found, like, you know what? I just don't feel like doing that. I don't doom scroll like I did, because it's just, I get worked up. It forces me to, put the phone away, just be. I have a sauna, and that's one of my favorite. Just go sit, meditate, spend some time with those thoughts in your head. Take the small victories.
Yeah. For the folks that are out there who can hear and do listen, and maybe, if you're still listening to this podcast at this stage, maybe you do find the value in listening and want to hone in on that skill. Brant and I are very clear that we are not experts in listening. We just find value in listening, and we feel that the world could be a little bit better place if everybody listened just a little bit closer versus just figuring out what the next thing is going to be said. To those folks that can hear and that do listen and do put the value in that, what messages do you have for them?
Don't take it for granted, because it could be gone tomorrow. And just be aware that others may not have the same abilities that you do and struggle a little bit more, and be patient. I'm constantly, I'm sorry, can you say that again? Can you, be patient, be kind, and be aware. People are dealing with some things. I bump into people, or I don't hear people coming around a corner, like in a grocery store, and it's like, oh, I'm sorry. I don't pay attention to that. Right. So it's not like I'm intentionally ignoring people. And a lot of people do these days, which is unfortunate and sad, because people are not present. Right. So just having that awareness and give people their space, and I don't know, just be kind. That's a general rule for anything.
Sure. It's just a general life rule, right? Be present, be aware, and be kind, because you don't know what people are dealing with. And
Absolutely.
if they're not wearing the t-shirt that says all the things that are going on in their lives right now, and people always do have stuff going on in their lives, I think we can take that away.
Yeah.
Be kind, be present.
There's no grace anymore, Drew.
Yeah.
And I think people need to give people some grace.
your message is slow down, take it easy,
100%.
be kind,
Absolutely.
be understanding. So thank you for that.
No, thank you. I enjoy this. This helps me. It helps provide that awareness.
Thanks, Doug.
I appreciate it, Drew. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man.
It's great.
Thanks for coming on.
All right, Drew, that was awesome. Shout out to Doug. Shout out to you. You guys had a fascinating conversation about tinnitus, about mental health, and about how to adapt. I don't know, just find a new way of being in life. I can't help but just being like, whew, he's got some strength. Like what am I trying to say? I
He's
appreciate
dealing with
him.
a lot of shit.
Yes, he's dealing with a lot of shit. So I appreciate him sharing that. And I've never had that before, but there's a number of things where I'm like, man, I can relate to this, or I've never thought of that before. I was fascinated to hear about how he consciously is looking for the things that make him happy, or for the things that bring him joy. He talked about taking time for himself, taking those small victories and having some appreciation there. And I think that's something we can all do. Really just being grateful for where we are in the moment, giving grace to others. These are lessons not, I think, maybe just for him, but I think all of us could apply as well.
Yeah, and you're right, and great takeaways. And the slowing down, the awareness, those are those things that everybody should be doing, but we don't. But he's now forced to do that. And people talk, You hear that in other instances too. It's like, well, it forced this thing that happened, this tragic thing or whatever it is, forced me to slow down. It forced me to pay attention. It forced me to, maybe show a little more empathy in the world, etc. The fact that all of this went so haywire so quickly with the vertigo and the tinnitus and the deafness and all those things, this happened to Doug. To go through that first, I think he framed it as 4, 6, maybe 8 weeks with no answers. He's gone through some shit, to put it vaguely. So that to me was probably the biggest surprise as he worked through this. And I'm proud of him to keep going through it and to keep working on it. And again, if anybody's out there that's listening and you want to get in contact with him, reach out to us. We'll be able to. I'm sure he'd love to talk to you about it. So he said he's very open to that, and we can connect folks very easily.
Next time on I'm Listening, we get into a conversation about conversations.
Do you like having conversations, Brant?
I enjoy a good conversation. I do not enjoy a not good conversation.
See, Brant? But what creates a good conversation? There's probably an exchange of somebody talking. And I'd imagine at some point there's an exchange of somebody listening.
Right.
Good.
Okay, so we got this conversation. What are you going to do with it?
Well, see, this is the thing. We're going to pick this thing apart. I believe that good or even a great conversation has this beautiful balance. But my friend, what if there's imbalance in that conversation?
What if there is imbalance in the force?
The origin of this conversation today comes from a term I heard recently, the me monster.
Me monster.
The me monster.
Drew, you brought this to me recently, and my eyes lit up because I'm like, oh my gosh, I've not heard this term before, but I think I've been the me monster before. I can relate where I've been that person to take over the conversation, right?
Yeah, me too. Right? So then I'm all it's like when somebody offers you a piece of gum or a mint and you're like, well, do I have bad breath? When somebody brings up a me monster, you're like, are you talking about me?
Yeah.
If you do feel that you are a me monster, or you've been told that you're a me monster, it's okay, because Brant and I are going to help you through this. And if you've never heard of the term before, or you don't know what we're talking about, we're going to teach you a few things.
So we're really looking at some of those things that can tip the scales in that exchange and what you can do about it. Sometimes it could be us, yourself, that is the me monster, or it could be the other person you're talking to that is being the me monster. What do you do about it?
The me monster.
In the description of this podcast, you'll find more information about this topic and to see a list of sources used. This podcast is created and produced by Drew Richmond and Brant Christofferson, editing by me, and theme music by Drew. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time.